Your job is a means to an end. Your job is a means to your ability to live out your mission, not to study Torah. That's part of your mission. You have to know your mission. But your job is a means to an end. Your job is a tool in your ability to draw yourself closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It isn't your mission.
Shalom Aleichem, and welcome to Stark Tank, the podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. It's Elul, and we are preparing for the Yamim Noraim with the theme of defining success. When we take stock of where we are holding as a cheshbon hanefesh that will hopefully lead to tshuva, we are essentially making a comparison, where we are versus where we should be. One of the things that I set out to understand through this podcast is how to define success as a Ben Torah in the workforce. Where should we be? Many of my rabbeim emphasize having very ambitious goals. How do we balance that with the blessed constraints of work, family, and community? This is what we are talking about during Elul. This week's episode is with Rav Simi Lerner. Rav Simi is an educator at various institutions in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. He is a hardcore Hirschian, and we talk about Torah im Derech Eretz and other fundamental ideas from Rav Hirsch and how they help us define success. Oh, and Rav Simi is a certified electrician, zipping around Beit Shemesh to knock down walls, repair wires, and more. Before we begin, a quick personal request. Please take 10 seconds to help us grow this show by leaving a 5-star review and hitting that subscribe button. Thank you. My name is Yaakov Wolf, and this is Stark Tank. Rav Simi Lerner, welcome to Stark Tank. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Pleasure. And thank you for having me. It's quite a privilege.
So we're in Elul, and we're having a little series where we're talking about how to define success. And in this conversation, we're going to be talking a lot about the Torah of Rav Hirsch and how that helps us define success as Bnei Torah in the workforce. So maybe by way of introduction, you could introduce yourself a little bit and how you have become so connected and attached to the Torah of Rav Hirsch.
So it's a bit of an interesting journey, and I like using this opportunity as it will hopefully become clear. My attachment to Rav Hirsch wasn't from my parents. It wasn't from my school, my yeshiva. It came about me in quite a unique way. So I was in yeshiva for a bunch of years, and I left yeshiva to become an electrician. And I came back to yeshiva, and I worked as an electrician, Ben Torah, before I was married, and sort of existed in that sort of state. And but I wanted to find something within the Jewish world that I could really connect to. Now, I have a unique gift. It's called being dyslexic, which means reading text is a profound struggle, to say the least. And not only a profound struggle in terms of your ability to learn, existentially, there's a certain dread because we are the people of the book. And if you're people of the book and you're dyslexic, well, there's no place for you there. So I wanted to find someone I could connect to on the first level, meaning not on the level of a translation, but on the level of I could actually have an opinion. I could tackle the ideas directly. So I looked around. I could have gone to the Hirschian directly because often they're translated from the Arabic, but it's still cooler to read it in Hebrew. But then there was Rav Hirsch, and no one reads it in the German, so I was like, let's give this a shot. And I got hooked. I got hooked by his perspective, his ability to articulate Jewish ideas in a meaningful, foundly rational way, but at the same time emotionally connected. And what led me to him wasn't why I stayed. I stayed for the ideas. I arrived because of the language, but that was how I came to Rav Hirsch. It was a bit of a roundabout way. And the reason why I like opening with this and really diving straight into what attracted me to it is that often when I talk about Rav Hirsch and I talk about, I'm a teacher, I teach in yeshivas, seminaries, and when people hear that someone is able to engage in the world of Torah in a meaningful way, whilst having that sort of handicap of text, I get phone calls and messages and people are like, well, can we talk about it? And I find that also part of my mission as an educator. So I like to join those two together.
It's really amazing, and I also certainly feel the same way when reading Rav Hirsch. And I guess it leads to a bit of an interesting question, which is like, where's everybody else, right? If Rav Hirsch has this special ability, and sort of people need to find Rav Hirsch who maybe some places don't necessarily view him as a mainstream or core curriculum, as you indicated, sort of you stumbled upon it. It wasn't part of your regular chinuch that you were getting in the mainstream. Well, like, is it sort of interesting why everyone else is missing that? Why are people okay with anything less than what Hirsch is able to articulate and the beauty that he's able to stir up in people like me and you?
So it's a good question. It's he was because he was on the one side, he was expressing ancient ideas in a modern language, but in such a beautiful and, I suppose, connected way that speaks to us. And your question is that, okay, he did such a good job of it. First of all, why is he not on everybody's bookshelf? And also, often when people tell me about Rav Hirsch, they say, that's what drew them to Judaism. If they're Baal Tshuva, they'll say, I first read Charav and it blew me away. And then they often later on in their of journey find their way back to Rav Hirsch. Meaning it drew them into the beginning, they then went through the sort of yeshivish, and then they sometimes come back to Rav Hirsch. And it's a difficult thing to answer why people aren't drawn to him directly. It's because some of his ideas are challenging. He was such a thinker that you couldn't really ignore Rav Hirsch, but at the same time, he was at a time where there were lots of other thinkers, lots of other different perspectives, and it's sort of like there are different derachim that people can take. But I do find that when people spend the time with Rav Hirsch, it really does have a profound effect on them.
Right. Okay, so let's dive into Rav Hirsch a little bit. The well-known slogan is Torah im Derech Eretz, and so maybe you could just start by explaining to us what exactly that means. It's thrown around a lot as a slogan, but you've spent a lot of time actually going into what that actually means, what Rav Hirsch actually meant when he wrote about this topic. So I'd love for you to tell us about that.
So it's a great question, and it's a controversial question, because every Tom, Dick, and Harry who has an opinion on Rav Hirsch has an opinion on exactly what this term means. And I often think it's a sign of a great thinker. A great thinker like the Rambam. You have multiple different interpretations of the Rambam. What did he mean? Rav Yosef Ber Soloveitchik, another interpreter that people interpret him in different ways. He's looked at the Torah, came up with a lens, and different people look at it and tell you what he thought. Similar with Rav Hirsch. So why is it, in my opinion, such an important slogan, as you mentioned, is because it articulates a Jew's mission in the world. He used the word Derech Eretz. I think it's not a new term. It comes from Chazal. And I think the best expositor of what it means to live a life of Torah in Derech Eretz was given over by his grandson, Rav Mordechai Breuer. And the way he put it, and this may take a moment, but I think it's worth articulating. He compared it to what's called a Hegelian synthesis, where the Torah is on one side, and through the Torah you see the world. That's the Derech Eretz. And it's not that the Derech Eretz is this sort of compromise that nebuch you have to engage with. No, Torah is your mission. Torah is the way, the lenses you choose to view the raw material that is the world. But when you draw them together, when you engage in the Derech Eretz of your time, you don't compromise on your Torah and you don't compromise in the Derech Eretz. But what I mean by a Hegelian synthesis is they come together at as a new expression, a higher expression. You have the Torah on one side, it engages in the world. You gain from the world, meaning you gain from the perspectives of the world, but you're also engaging in the world. Torah cannot be left without the Derech Eretz. Then it becomes isolated and meaningless and irrelevant. And you can't just completely sit on the side of the Derech Eretz, because then you have assimilation. Both of them together allow you to become what he called the Israelite Jew, the Israelite man, sorry. This ideal Jew is the one who is able to morph both the Torah and the Derech Eretz together in a new, higher ideal that the Torah on its own could not do. And this isn't a limitation of the Torah, it's just a misunderstanding. It is a category error to expect the Torah to be everything. It's not. It is the lens that you view the world through. It is the way I like to put it. It is the method of extracting meaning from the world. The world is brimming with meaning. The world is a creation by God, and it is your job to extract meaning from the world through the Torah. Now, a person says, well, why do I need the world? Well, that's a meaningless question in this context. Of course you need the world. You need the Torah, and you need the Derech Eretz. There is things that are present in your time, in your history, in the Derech Eretz, that can be synthesized into the Torah perspective. It becomes part of your Torah perspective. Obviously, you've got to be careful. You don't want to take everything wholesale, but you have to also be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. But the Derech Eretz is not only has a symbiotic relationship with your Torah, it is also the landing or the landscape in which you engage the Torah. So it's Torah im Derech Eretz, not much else you would put it, but people call it like Torah umada or Torah uchochma. Those are like sort of ways of saying this Torah, and these other things out there. I think the YU world would call it Torah chochma, and no, that's what Rabbi Sachs called it, Torah chochma and Torah umada. It's like there's the Torah, and then these other things. Now for Rav Hirsch, it was this synthesis. It was this new ideal that could only come about if you genuinely engaged in the Derech Eretz of your time. So why is it such a profound slogan to Jewish people today? It's because it says that not that engaging in the world isn't a nebuch, a compromise, no, I have to go into the outside world. It's like, no, you're a man with a mission. You're a woman with a mission to the world. And the only way you can accomplish this mission is if you engage in the Derech Eretz. So when you say Torah only, I mean, obviously there were worldviews that said Torah only and Schwab and et cetera, but looking at it through this lens, to say Torah only is a meaningless statement. To say Torah im Derech Eretz is another way of saying, I want to live my life as a mission of a Jew. And the only way to do that is in the Derech Eretz of my time, because I don't have someone else's time. I have my time. I have the ideas of my time. I have the philosophies of my time. And I have the landscape, the raw material of the world of my time. And it is my job to enact the Torah on that.
Can you give an example of what that Derech Eretz might look like? If I'm understanding you correctly, it's more about the thinkers and the thought that might come from very, smart and brilliant and moral people who are not Talmidei Chachamim. Is that what you're talking about? Can you give us some more about that?
Absolutely. And that, by the way, that's the part. Now, obviously, most people will be with me from the point of view of the Derech Eretz, meaning the Torah has to be lived out, obviously, duh. In which case, obviously, you need a Derech Eretz. But people get a bit uncomfortable when Rav Hirsch talks about politeness, cultured, being a cultured individual, worldly wisdom, these being also values that he talks about. Now, obviously, there is a higher value. That's the value of your mission. But these are also values. So a person says, well, okay, maybe in Rav Hirsch's time. And once again, that is taking Rav Hirsch and misunderstanding what he's saying. He's saying, not only in my time, he's saying, no, in every time. Now, back to your question, where do I see these thinkers? Well, I can give you examples. Obviously, one has to be careful, and one has to be have rabbeim, and people have to have people you can bounce ideas off to make sure you're not just giving into your own cognitive biases and your own personal weaknesses. That always has to be said. But to name a few, I'm giving a course this week during Elul in Midreshet Rachel, at one of the seminaries that me and Rivka teach in. And the course I'm giving is different ideologies that appear within Judaism. And at the end of it, I want to talk about blending and appreciating different perspectives. There is a thinker called Jonathan Haidt, who wrote a book called The Righteous Mind, where he spoke about moral taste buds, without going into all the details. But that is a paradigm-shifting way of looking at the world and how you can look at people you disagree with and how to gain and how to have productive conversations. Now, someone can say to me, if it's a good idea, it's in Torah. And I would say, okay, but not in any meaningful way. What I mean by that is you can say it's in Torah in some sort of like spiritual, primordial, God created the world and everything is dependent on God, but that's not interesting or useful. It could be a slogan, everything's in the Torah, but you don't mean that in a meaningful way. It took this man to experience the world and come up with this idea with his sensitivity and his wisdom, and then give it to us. And then I can take it and say, wow, this is a way I can articulate a Jewish idea. I can draw people closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu with this idea. And it's in my curriculum. It's in my notebooks. It's in my worksheet. And I can give you other examples, but that was one that came to mind as a good example of something that your listeners could open it up and not read the whole book because that takes way too long. But you can do a quick review on a quick summary on YouTube. So it's worth it.
Got it. So if I understand correctly, the idea here, I have like a personal dilemma and I struggle with this all the time where I have time in my commute. I go drive to work, I drive back from work, and I have a very hard time, holding cup with shiurim. So I enjoy listening to podcasts, and most of the podcasts are not Jewish. They talk about psychology and they talk about history. They talk about politics and other things. So according to Hirsch, that's not like I don't really have the strength for Torah, so I'll use it for something which is maybe entertaining or interesting or chachma. They're saying lechatchila about having that outlet to be able to gain and grow from the wisdom that's in the world around us.
So it's a good question, and it's a dilemma that, and once again, just let me stress, because something's a dilemma doesn't make it bad. People often find that difficult, meaning, no, obviously it's a struggle. Meaning, when I'm trying to think of something that happened recently. I was preparing something on the idea of building a home, whatever, and there's this idea that I've heard from Friedrich Nietzsche called The Last Man, and it's a way of approaching money and an obsession with money and addiction to money, and I thought it was a great idea, and I could have got lost in a bit of a rabbit hole of developing, and that wouldn't have been useful. It just wouldn't have been useful. It was a great idea. It's time to accept that idea, reject that idea, and move on. I was tempted to go down a rabbit hole. And the question is, it's a question of sensitivity. It's a question of growth. You'll mess up. You'll mess up. And that's, by the way, it's worth pointing, just especially because we're talking about messing up is part of the program. It's not a bug, it's a feature. This is we could perhaps discuss this later, the idea of how Rav Hirsch looked at the sin in the Garden of Eden. Part of our experience in the world is that we mess up, and through messing up, we grow. And the answer to your question, I'm going down listening to a podcast. Do I listen to Rabbi Ezra Bick, or do I listen to, think of someone who I can get in trouble that I listen to, Modern Wisdom by Chris Williamson? Who do I listen to? And the answer is, I probably should lean more into Rabbi Ezra Bick, because that's going to grow me in terms of my mission. But to negate Modern Wisdom and not hear those those world's wisest minds would be such a loss in my own experience, but also in my ability to teach my students. Now, when a person comes along and says, you've been polluted by non-Jewish wisdom, then we're having a different conversation here. I don't look at, is there a danger? Of course there's a danger. Once again, I'll always accept there's a danger and there is a need for curiosity, but more importantly, humility. Obviously, and when you have a person who doesn't have a rebbe or doesn't have a person that he can go to then obviously that's a different conversation. But I think it's a challenge, and you'll err, and we can err on the side of caution, but you will err, you will make a mistake, and you'll grow.
I guess one more thing that I want to ask you about this framework is, I guess it's a two-part question. Number one is, are we sure that all of us should have the confidence to be able to make the judgment call as to what should or shouldn't? You mentioned there's the wheat and the chaff, and within there are dangers. So should we all have the self-confidence to be able to decide? Most of our rabbeim are not people who know the difference between this podcaster, that podcaster, this Christian philosopher, and that secular thinker. So how do we work through that issue on a practical level, number one? And maybe number two is something that we discuss in this podcast a lot, more specifically, is about sports. It's something which is very common as a leisure, a pastime, a quasi-religion of the outside world, and many Beit Torah use it as a pastime, or maybe a little bit more than a pastime. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are about that for Ben Torah.
That's a great question. It's funny because I have no interest in sports. As I said, I have my areas of interest that I engage in. I'm going to a different time, but they're things that I enjoy that aren't clearly Torah. They could be compared to sports, if you will. But how to balance it? Let's go to the first point. The point about, the world of our rabbeim isn't the world of podcasts. They haven't been engaging in that world, but they have been reading. They have been reading, and the wise rabbeim that we engage with. Just to give you an example, a lot of my rabbeim will quote secular philosophers. Like, why are they quoting secular philosophers? What a chutzpah! It's Torah. Why are you telling me about what was it? Huxley, Rabbi Ezra Bick in the show I listened to recently, I think, quoted Huxley and then Kat. Like, what chutzpah? You're teaching me Torah and you're polluting it with... No, obviously not. He was able to do it. Now, he's able to experience the world, experience the wisdom of the world, and then integrate it into his ability to teach. Now, is it everybody has the ability to do that? I don't want to say I have the ability to do that, because most people aren't interested in that. You have to remember that as well. Most people aren't interested in that idea of integration. You're a very unique person if you're interested in ideas. People aren't necessarily that interested in ideas. When they listen to podcasts, they're not taking notes. It's like the news or politics. Meaning the people who are interested in ideas, I think if they're interested in ideas and they're interested in Torah as well, they'll be able to find someone that they could bounce ideas off of. Find someone that they look up to that they can bounce ideas off that person. And if that person says, well, I have no interest in things then that's not the right person for them to bounce things off. They have to, say to Harab, you've got to find yourself someone who you can bounce ideas off that is sensitive to the outside world and has a respect for the outside world.
And sports?
So sports is a tricky one because I don't play sports. But in terms of my own leisure time and times that I engage in things that for my own personal enjoyment, I always say it's a tricky one because the classic thing that I was taught in yeshiva was, you've got to do it because it's a kiyum of whatever it may be, your ability to relax, whatever. And that's a little bit silly, in my opinion, because if you're playing football, you've got to be playing football. You can't be playing football for something else. When you enter sort of a flow state, you can't be doing it because you're playing football you've got to immerse yourself completely. Otherwise, you're not playing football. You're playing some weird Murkov or whatever it is you're doing. You've got to really immerse yourself in it. Now, a person can say, okay, once again, a question of balance. I would always say that when you're enjoying your leisure time, actually enjoy it. Don't, on a meta level, is it part of your avodas Hashem? Well, unless it's actively inappropriate, but of course it is, because you're living a healthy life. Thereby, when you engage in it, you have to engage in it, I think to an extent, completely. And then once you do it like that, you'll actually gain the benefits from it. Is it how to find the balance? Once again, experience. And I would always say to our listeners that you will mess up and you'll grow. And the same way when I give a class, I'll often teach, and this is the similar sort of thing. I'll teach, and a couple of months later, I'll teach the same class again and think, wow, I thought that, it's a bit embarrassing. And I tell that to my students. It's one of the most terrifying things about teaching, is that you grow. And the worst teachers, not to say that the worst teachers, there are no worst teachers, but the worst teachers are the teachers who don't change, who haven't changed their things. Like, he gives the classic situation every single time. Where have you been for the past 10 years? That's a danger. Stagnation is a danger as well as going off the derech. I mean, what the good way of phrasing this is, irrelevance is a danger as well. And relevance only comes about through growth and through change and through making mistakes.
Wow. So we've been speaking for almost 20 minutes about the idea of Torah im Derech Eretz. We haven't really spoken at all about work. We spoke about knowledge and ideas from the secular world. You also made reference to midos and politeness and ways of interactions and mannerisms. So let's talk about work a little more, because in the Mishnah, Yafet Talmud Torah im Derech Eretz, according to many Mefarshim, and the Sefer of the Mishnah, right, called Torah She'ein Imam Melacha Sofa B'Tela Geras V'Avon, is a statement about how Torah and work interact. According to Rav Hirsch, the ideas that he expressed, was he not focusing on work, or was he in a different way? How do we think about our careers in this light?
So that's a great question. That's a great question. Because often when people say Torah and Derech Eretz, they sort of say, well, yeah, to get a job, right? To get a job. And it's like, just a point on this, just to really just finish off our point on ideas. Rav Hirsch said, if you look at your study of wisdom in the non-Jewish sense, purely utilitarianly, meaning just what can I get from it? He says that will follow over to your Torah learning as well, which means when you study wisdom, it shouldn't be, what can I get from this? You should be able to experience wisdom because you grow as a person. When Rav Hirsch speaks about work, it's important to point this out, because when he says Derech Eretz, obviously part of your Derech Eretz is the job you have. And I'm trying to think of the best way of expressing this, because the place that he primarily actually discusses work as opposed to Torah, he discusses work when he speaks about, I think it's Mitzvah 79 or something in Chorev, where he speaks about setting up a home, where he talks about what you have to be and who you have to be before you set up a home. He describes that, he points to independence being an important value. He talks about when you're choosing your job should be that which is a means to the ends of your mission. Not you should be getting, now obviously if you have the ability to get a job that I don't know, you're a doctor or I don't know, whatever it may be, something that calls you in a moral sense that you can connect to your Jewish mission, that is beautiful. But a Jew should look at his job not, and I'll use the language carefully here, not as his vocation. And this is an idea that is developed sort of a pollution by the Protestants of the Catholic notion of a vocation. A vocation used to mean that which you were called to the clergy, a monastic tradition, to be isolated. You were called to be part of the religious clergy. With Luther, this is an idea developed by Max Weber in his explaining to us what exactly capitalism is and how it grew, describes that people started to look at their job as their vocation. Vocation is the same word as their calling. I mean, your job was your calling. In the same way we get upset when people say, you meet someone, you say, okay, what'd you do? And people say, you shouldn't say that. It's always a weird one, because what else are you going to say? And there's a whole discussion on that. But why don't people like that? Because even people don't like being drilled down to their job, their essence being collapsed into their occupation. That is a Protestant or a Lutheran concept. Your job isn't your essence. Your job isn't a sign of your chosenness. For Rav Hirsch, and he's clear, your job is a means to an end. Your job is a means to your ability to live out your mission, not to study Torah. That's part of your mission. You have to know your mission. But your job is a means to an end. Your job is a tool in your ability to draw yourself closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Your job is a means to be able to fulfill your mission. It isn't your mission. That's as I said, within a Protestant framework, your vocation was your mission. It was an indicative of your essence, where you get the idea that Weber felt that this was what fueled capitalism, this idea that your job was your very essence. But for Rav Hirsch, he's very clear, we cannot look at it like that. Our job is our means to be able to live our lives out as a Jew. Now, sometimes, obviously, in the workplace, you'll be living that out, and sometimes not in the workplace. But the workplace may be the environment which you will live out your mission as a Jew as well. But the actual accumulation of wealth and cash is your ability to live out your mission, to be able to build a family. And to get obsessed with the money side of it, he warns us against, and the dangers of that. It clouds the mission, it clouds the purpose. Well, yeah, not sure. Yeah, I think that's pretty much.
So I'll try to pull apart some of these ideas and try to understand for myself a little bit better. You set up this framework, and even in this question, you said that Torah im Derech Eretz, so Torah is the core mission, and Derech Eretz saying that you can really jump into not as a utilitarian, but really as a fundamental way that can enhance and supplement and enrich, not in an optional way, to really enrich in a mandatory and obligatory way, that framework. That's Torah im Derech Eretz. And now work, you're saying, is not that, meaning Torah im Derech Eretz is...
The Derech Eretz is your job as well, because you cannot live without having a job, and you have to engage in the Derech Eretz of the world. The person will sit down and say, I'm not going to get a job, well, then he'll go hungry. But the Derech Eretz, obviously part of your Derech Eretz is your job, and within the context of when we're discussing what a job is, we can elaborate on that. But is the Derech Eretz just your job? No, not at all. Does that pass it out a bit better?
again, you're saying it's not a calling. So what is it?
It's a means to an end. It is a means for you to live out your mission as a Jew in the world. Because to live out your mission as a Jew in the world, on the one side, might involve, I don't know, being a nice person in the workplace. But that's not fundamentally what it is. It's your ability to make money, to be able to live out higher ideals. The Greeks were very similar to this. You know, Hanukkah time, we say, oh, we're not Greek. No, we were Greek like this. The Greeks believed that friendship, philosophy, discussions were where true meaning lay. It wasn't your job. Yeah, you did your job to make money, to be able to sit and have talks with your friends, which, by the way, people could do a lot more of that today. I mean, sitting down with a bunch of guys and having a conversation, discussing ideas, even doing it over beer, is healthy and important and brings meaning in people's lives. So the Greeks knew that. The modern West doesn't know that as well. Your job is your calling, and that the word's vocation means calling, and we mix the two. And I think what Rav Hirsch has tried to tell us is that your job isn't your vocation. Your job is your occupation. You are occupied with it because it is a means to an end. The end being your ability to live in this world as a tired Jew.
And so is that something that you mentioned before, that you went out to become an electrician? You mentioned, I think it was before you discovered Rav Hirsch, but how do you think about your professional side of your life in light of this idea?
So it's easy to make everything I've done sound perfect. I'm very good at that. Not that what I've done sound perfect. That sounds too arrogant. I mean, backwards justifying it, if that makes sense. The reason why I became an electrician is because I wanted something that could make money and I could be independent. That was it. It was either that or a plumber, and it's way less dirty.
Got it. And I mean, again, it's just taking these ideas, the way you set them up and applying them to someone who is making career decisions, what does that look like? And how does a person use that approach in order to make smart career decisions and approach his both big junctures, but also day-to-day life in the office in light of this?
So it's worth pointing out, and this is something that I've come to terms with quite as I have more experience. There are different personalities out there. There is the entrepreneur personality that will look at what I'm doing as being like, wait a minute, you charge for your time? You want to be mediocre? You don't want to excel? You want to be successful? And my response is, thank God I'm very successful. I might have different goals. So the question is, what are your goals? Are you, meaning, in relationship to Judaism as well? The only point I would say is an orientating factor that Rav Hirsch gives us is, no matter what you do, never fully identify with it. You aren't an entrepreneur. That's not what you are. If you have your entrepreneurial skills and you can apply them to your mission, the better, fair. But you are not an entrepreneur. You are a Jew, and you have a mission in this world. And even if you're 9 to 5 or you're 9 to 9, doesn't make a difference. You may have a bit of a job, and you have the personality that you have to start up, and you know the classic drill. And you're up all night, and it's from a health standpoint, but also from a religious standpoint. The danger Rav Hirsch would be warning us against is, don't identify with your job. You aren't your job. You are higher. There are higher ideals that are calling you. And there's a higher mission that you are supposed to be beholden to. And the job serves that mission. Now, this sounds really maybe verbose and like, well, relax. Nobody lives like that. I mean, of course, I'm talking on the level of ideals. Not every single day do I live that in my life, but I try and hold it up at the forefront of my mind as an ideal that I can pursue, that I can reach towards. I don't live it the whole time, but if I articulate it as an ideal, then I can live towards it.
Great. So let's talk a little bit more about what that mission is that we're supposed to be thinking about and striving. Maybe we connect it to one of the podcasts that you host. It's called Judaism from Within, which is based on the Torah of Rav Hirsch. Maybe you can start by telling us about what that title is about and why it's significant in developing a hashkafa around what it means to be a Jew.
So that's a great. It's a good saying. I nicked it from Rav Hirsch directly. In the German, it's why do I know how to say that? My wife is Swiss. Yay. So what does it mean? It means Judaism understood from within. Okay. Where else are you going to understand it from? Now, the Rav Hirsch develops this. There was 2 books that he was supposed to write. He wrote Chorev, and he was supposed to write a book called Moriah, which was the philosophy of Judaism, the underpinning of Judaism. That was sort of put together in the 19 Letters. And the 19 Letters is a book where he, and this is a sort of an abstraction of it, he's asking 3 questions, because he has a fellow coming up to him in a sort of a story, if you will. A fellow comes up to him and says, why should I be doing this Jewish thing? I'm getting married. Why should I be doing Judaism? And he rips on Judaism on this first of these 19 letters. He rips on Judaism in a very harsh way. Obviously, it's Rav Hirsch doing this, and he doesn't pull his punches. And he basically says, how does Judaism help me in any way in my life? It is old. It is pointless. It is embarrassing. It is, and the best phrase he uses, do I have to be another link of a never-ending chain of misery? It's like, why? How does this help me? And Rav Hirsch's answer is truly strikes the core of this question that lots of people ask. He says, when did you assume that Judaism was trying to fulfill your goals? If you're going to appreciate Judaism, you have to work out what its goals are. Meaning, I'm here, does Judaism fulfill my goals? Maybe yes, maybe no. But what is Judaism's goals? What does Judaism want to achieve? Once you understand what Judaism wants to achieve, you can then make a decision whether to reject it or not. But to reject it because it doesn't fulfill your goals is, okay, you're rejecting something that it wasn't made to do. It's like rejecting a car for being a terrible horse. That's not what it is. That's not what it's supposed to do. The question is, what is Judaism's goals from its standpoint? What is it trying to achieve? Once you understand what it's trying to achieve, so you've asked that question, what is its goals from its lens? Hence, Judaism understood from within itself, not from your standpoint, not from another philosophy. What is Judaism's own goals? And the next question you would have to ask, is that a noble goal? Does it call you? Does it call you as being worthy of your service? A person will say, how can you ask such a question? It's a question, because we all ask it. Whether you claim to ask it or don't ask it, you have to choose to engage in Judaism. So what is its goal? Is it noble? Then how do the particulars of Judaism fulfill that goal? How do the particulars, the mitzvahs in the Torah, fulfill the goal? Thereby, when you engage in the mitzvahs, it's meaningful in the pursuit of the goal. That's what it means to understand Judaism from within.
And can you give us a broad strokes answer of what those goals are? That
it's going to set the problem is if I say to you, what is anti-Semitism? Like, it's a lot of things and it's not everything. And what is Judaism's goal? To get Q? No, it's more complex than that. I'll answer your question, but it's more complex than that, and it has to be developed. It's like when a kid comes to me in a Kiruv saying, why shouldn't I turn off a light switch? I say, I can explain to you why turning off a light switch has a moral deficiency to it as a Jew. I can develop that with you, but you can't ask me to do that on one foot. We have to build these ideas up. That being said, justice, love, and the education towards justice and love. That is what Judaism trying to propagate into the world. Through that, we grow closer to God. Through that, we bring the world of peace and the messianic vision. How does Judaism accomplish that? Welcome to Charav.
And for those who want more than the regalachas, which is what really needs to be done, so they can go and check out Judaism from Within on Spotify and other podcast platforms, and I appreciate that a lot. So where does that leave this whole idea of self-fulfillment? You all spoke about a little bit in the career context, but more generally in the Judaism context, if the first order of business is deciding what the Judaism from Within's goals are, and then how do I accept it, engage with it, help it accomplish its mission. So where does that leave the personal fulfillment piece, which is very popular in certain circles in Western society and in Jewish society also? How does that fit in?
Can you develop that? What do you mean the personal fulfillment side?
Meaning people think that I'm here and I need to feel fulfilled by reaching my full potential and becoming the best person that I can be. So, right, you're saying the focus is not on anything that has to do with my fulfillment. It has to do with Kadosh Baruch Hu's mission and me helping, being a soldier in that army.
So that's a great question, because it actually has a to answer it in a basic way is that if I ask you, I say, okay, what do you want to do with your life? And you say to me, well, I don't know, what have a meaningful life. I'm talking about a person who wants to lead a hedonistic life, a meaningful life. Now, in theory, you would agree that the highest ideal you would want to be in line with, the most noble mission you could possibly burden, the most noble goal, the highest ideal that you could possibly accept would actually relate to the highest dose of meaning in your life. The question is, what is that highest ideal? What is that highest goal? Now, a person can say, obviously, Torah, Hashem. Okay, so you have a North Star. You have a North Star. You have a direction that you're traveling towards. On the way there, you'll develop. On the way there, you'll change. The way Rav Hirsch understands Kedusha is similar to this. You have a positive feedback loop. You are a person. You view the world. You study Torah. The study in the Torah changes your perspective on the world. But then again, you look at the world again. And that changed perspective then learns Torah again. And your engagement in the world and your engagement in the Torah will continually grow. And you will grow through the experience. So yes, I have personal enjoyments and personal goals that in my mind are outside of Torah. But what I'm trying to do as a person is live my life in line with these highest ideals. Do I do it the whole time? No, but I'm trying to live my life in that direction. I have a North Star. I have a North Star, which means my life is on a trajectory. It's not I've accepted it or I haven't accepted it. I'm not made a proclamation of faith or anything like that. No, I'm living in line with the direction. In which case, what do I mean by a fulfilling life is that I'm trying to orientate my life to the best of my ability towards this higher ideal. In which case, there are probably things that I'm engaging in at the moment that I think are in line with the highest ideal, and they're just not. And maybe one time I'll get rid of them. Maybe I won't. But my point being that I have a North Star that I'm working towards. And in terms of fulfillment in my life, that comes through me feeling that I'm moving closer to that goal. Not getting it, to put it in my bag, I'm moving closer to it. So my job, when I make money, when I spend time with my family, when I spend time with my wife, we are working towards a unified mission. And that unified mission makes the individual particulars of our life in our day that much more meaningful.
And could you help us understand how all of these ideas apply to Talmud Torah and our personal learning? There are all these different programs and, Bi'in and Bikiyas and Halacha and Gemara and Hasidus and Musar and Chaburas and Chavrusas and this type of shir and that type of shir. So what are the key things that we should make sure that we're not missing with regards to our own personal learning that will help us live up to these ideals? I mean, I'm guessing that spending time learning Rav Hirsch would be a good one, but what other ideas can we take from this?
So, no, I actually wouldn't say that. I think because once again, there are different personalities. When I was younger and less mature, I was convinced that anybody who had a different perspective was like irrational. And I grew and I realized that no, there are different personalities and there are different ways of approaching God. But the key point that I would say for Rav Hirsch is the value of Torah is, this is he discusses on his piece where he discusses Talmud Torah. The goal of the Torah isn't to, I don't know, let me put it in the most stark way. The Torah is a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. The end in itself is to draw you closer to God. And that's what I mean by your mission. Not you personally only closer to God, but to draw the world closer to this ideal. And that's why I always use the word mission, because it is a word that is not used enough, and is a word Rav Hirsch uses the whole time. When I speak to young people and I talk about the language of mission, people feel like, what, there's a goal to this? There's like, I can pursue it. I can work towards it. It's like, I can grab this flag and march up that hill. I'm like, yes, you can. How do I go about doing that? I study Torah. I change my way of looking at the world. I extract meaning from the world in a more meaningful way. Through that, be that through Hasidus, be through Iyun, Bekias, different ways of doing that for different people and different rabbeim. I've, Baruch Hashem, got lots of people I learn from, and they all take different approaches. But the point being that when you're studying Torah, you should be looking, when people say, what does it mean to study Torah? Lishma. People think, well, I have to do it for no reason. It has to just be. Like, no, it's to achieve something. It is to achieve a change in you, and thereby to achieve a change in the world, and then achieve in a way that you relate to God. Thereby, whatever aspect of Torah you're engaged in, try and once again have the North Star in mind. Have that idea of mission in mind, and thereby it makes the actual experiencing of the limud more meaningful. Not that obviously you can do it the whole time, otherwise you'll go nuts, but I'm saying on points of reflection, on points of journaling, on points of thinking and reflecting on what you're learning and why you're learning it. Think of the mission of the Jew. And here's just another point. There'll be different ways of articulating that mission. Rav Hirsch does it in one way. I am sure there are great thinkers that do it in other ways that can be applied to your life.
And I mean, there are programs and people and halachos which talk about what we need to know, sort of intellectual knowledge, a certain set of curriculum that we should be trying to master. And I've always found that, personally, that type of learning is much less conducive to the transformative power that you were talking about. There are many things you could learn, but each thing has a different axis of how deep and shallow you're trying to really struggle with it. And, the Ian type of learning, is that a correct way of thinking about it? That there is certain value in just knowing and having the factoids in your curriculum, but the core in this framework is a more Ian style where whatever I'm learning, I'm struggling with it that will really change me and change my perspective? Or is there a different way to think about it?
So it's tricky because I'm not sure, because I can understand how a person can say studying Mishnayos is super important. Like, why? You're just learning concepts. So yeah, but you could say that you're learning, or you're trying to view the world through the categories of the divine, like you in a very efficient way. It's not halacha. It's you're learning a perspective on the world. A person can ridicule Ian, and a person can hype Ian up the rafters because you're molding your mind. You're training your mind. You're feeling that pressure, and you're engaging with the great thinkers of the generations. And the person can be doing Hasidus and say, how could you do anything else but Hasidus all day? I think it's a very much a question of a personal, what connects you. But also, I do think there are going to be things that are going to be fundamental. If you don't learn Tanakh, then you don't learn Nach, then you're going to be missing something fundamental. If you don't learn Mishnayos, then once again, there's going to be categories you're not going to be aware of. Doesn't mean you have to know them all now. Once again, it's a journey. And once again, the people who spend time learning Iyun, there's a huge value to that as well in terms of the development of the mind. I'd say anytime you find yourself over-obsessing, probably at times take a step back.
Got it. And I'm wondering, you mentioned the gift that you have of dyslexia. There are many people who have different struggles in learning, or challenges in learning, or blessings when it comes to their different way of learning. I'm wondering if you have any advice to parents and educators about there how to take this in the right way, because there's a certain, value, a universal value of Talmud Torah being one of the three pillars that the world stands on. But in a certain sense, that can and does lead to certain educational frameworks that can lead kids with learning disabilities to be very, very challenged. It's a little bit off topic, but I think it's an important one. I'm wondering if you could weigh in on it.
No, for sure, for sure. The only way I call it a gift because it's a less pejorative way of describing it. There was a famous book that came out called The Gift of Dyslexia. But I don't consider it much of a gift, to be completely blunt with you. Maybe it makes me neural divergent, but and it has other advantages. But simply speaking, yeah, it's not fun, especially. And by the way, an interesting historical point. We're called people of the book. Do you know where that comes from? It comes from the Muslims. We, the Christians, and I think the Zoroastrians were considered people of the book, maybe because we had texts that we considered central. But anyway, people of the book, which landed on the Jews, the idea of dyslexia, ADHD, all these other learning disabilities or learning struggles, what people have in a classic educational framework. The only thing I can recommend is lean into technology, straight up. And people say how I listen to everything from PDFs that I put through speech synthesizers to AI using, and once again, every one of these technologies can be abused. Your brain can atrophy if you use them in the wrong way, obviously. But if you're struggling in a way that technology, or let's use God-focused language, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given you this Derech Eretz to engage in Torah, and you investigate it, use it to the best of your ability, come up with other ideas, come up with other models, come up with other methods, and you can really grow as an individual, but also give to the Torah world in a way that you didn't think was possible.
Amazing. So we're getting close to the end here. I want to wrap up with a few more questions before we get to our rapid fire. I come from a proud Yekish heritage, and the Yekas and the Litvaks are sort of clumped together in the group that is identified with more intellect and maybe less emotional, less personal passion and flowing with Kedusha externally. So I'm wondering if you could tell us, is that according to Rav Hirsch's actual ideas, how do we think about the emotional passions part of our Hashem versus the more reserved and intellectual and other parts?
So it's a tricky one because I never experienced Yekis per se, meaning it wasn't part of my experience growing up. My father-in-law happens to be a Yeki. All I can speak is for Rav Hirsch. And the language that it is true, Rav Hirsch doesn't use Kabbalistic concepts. I mean, people debate it, like whether he did, but it's not explicit, and he very much warns against the way Kabbalistic ideas have been taken today. But that being said, because a person's not using spiritualistic language, when you sit into his world, when you sit into the way that he talks about our purpose, that the role we have to play in this reality, the passion in which he describes our duty and our potential is I find it moving in a way that is real. When I say real, telling me about spiritual nachas of Hashem is nice, but if we reflect on that for a minute, we realize we kind of don't know what we're talking about. But when you talk to me about a structure of value and meaning that I can be involved in, the way he describes it and calls on me, every time I put down Rav Hirsch, I turn to my wife Rivka and say, why do I do anything else?
You mentioned before that you are involved in Kiruv. Does that also stem from Rav Hirsch in a certain way?
Not really. It stems from my love of teaching and teaching different types of people and showing different people. And it is true that because I come up with perhaps a bit of a different perspective than your classic Kiruv rabbi, I attract the people who wouldn't be attracted by your classic Kiruv rabbi. So I do think I'm playing a role there. But no, my attraction to it was a responsibility to offer our tradition to those who perhaps didn't have the opportunity, and to offer them a lens on this that they would perhaps find attractive. And if they do, they're welcome to those lenses.
Got it. And last question before we enter our rapid fire, your combination of being both an electrician and a teacher, is that based on like the Rambam's idea of not accepting money for Talmud Torah? Is it practically because the salaries in teaching are not high enough? And maybe practically, like what's the balance like? How do you split your time between these different things?
So I'm very blessed that both me and my wife Rivka, we both love teaching, and we both teach in both Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. She is a programmer and quite a successful one, and I'm an electrician. Well, I always joke she does the intellectual thing for a job, and I smash down walls because in Israel it's all in concrete. I also love doing electrical work. I love it. I absolutely love it. I find it meaningful. I specifically find it meaningful doing electrical work in Eretz Yisrael. When I was in England doing it, I found it very frustrating. And I moved here, and my electrical life was lit up. No, it wasn't based off the Rambam. It wasn't based on not taking it, because that wasn't my plan at the beginning. My plan was get a job, and then see where things take me. Now that I have a parnasa that I can always go back to, I do a couple of jobs a week. Thank God, an electrician pays okay. Teaching doesn't pay particularly well, but we are able to balance these worlds and have a living for our family. So that's why I did. As I said, I didn't have the in mind. Now that being said, being in Kirov, being a teacher, being able to tell my students I have a real job. Not to say that teaching isn't a real job, but the point is that you don't want the student to think that either convincing you or them liking you, your parnasa is dependent on it. It's like, no, I'm an electrician as well, and I love teaching, and I think it's important. That does, post facto, add a certain quality and an air to it, but but I didn't. It wasn't planned like that.
I mean, it sort of does echo the Rambam's.
Well, of course it does, but I didn't want to be so arrogant as to claim that was my goal from the beginning. My goal wasn't that.
It's interesting to see how it actually does work in a certain sense.
For sure. Thank God, I'm blessed that it plans itself out. For sure, that is definitely the case. It did, but that wasn't down to my, A, B, C, D, E. It just kind of worked out that way.
I just wanted to point out the fascinating idea, which is that not just that it worked out for you, and I'm happy that it does, but it really shows you the way that the Rambam's words about a Talmud Chacham who has his other job can really be lived out. And it's not like some ancient history, but it's saying.
I see. Fair.
Okay, so thank you so much. Let's head to our rapid fire round. 3 short questions, 3 hopefully short answers. The fall is coming. Shabbos getting a little bit shorter, but we still have nice long Shabbos afternoons. So what do you like to do at that time?
I play board games with my kids. I give a shir on the Moreh Nevuchim for an hour on long Friday, Shabbos afternoons, but mainly hang out with the kids.
Okay, great. And what's your favorite, book of Rav Hirsch, idea from Rav Hirsch to learn and to teach this time of year?
His idea on the Vidoy, the Hispada, he said confession is reflexive, which means you're not confessing to God, you're confessing to yourself. And through the articulation of a failure, you're on the first steps towards fixing it. Bit of a deep idea, worth looking into, but radically changes how you look at the idea of confession.
Is there a podcast episode to link to on that?
Probably. I'll find it and I'll send it to you.
And where in Rav Hirsch is that in the Chumash and
that's in Chumash, and I think so. But also in Elul and when he discusses Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
That is in Chorev.
No, the collective writings.
Collective writings in Elul. Okay, good. We will definitely try to get some links in the show notes, and people can go look that up for the full piece. And you obviously have your job as an electrician, your job as an educator. But if you had to choose a new job in a new field that you haven't done before, maybe something you had an itch to do as a kid or something like that, what would that be?
I'm either a video game designer or a carpenter.
Why does video game design call you?
Because I love video games.
Okay. Rav Simi Lerner, thank you so much for joining us, and we really learned a lot today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was an absolute pleasure.